headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador. I am Stefania Bravo, and this is From the South. The Prime Minister of Barbados, Mottley, is delivering her first budget in the Parliament. Establishing economic growth and lowering the personal income tax would be the highlights of the fiscal package. In her presentation, Mottley said the economy will not improve until there is stable growth. She also assured that she would continue cutting expenses while still investing in education and healthcare. Last year, the IMF and the government of Barbados agreed on a $219 million economic assistance plan.
Because that is what we promised the people. Brexit has curbed the enthusiasm for travel among our largest source market. The OECD has forced us to abandon a 30-year-old separation of tax rates between the domestic and the international business sector. Guns have poured into this country in the last 5 years, and we now have a problem, as I said, with gun crime not previously seen before. Barbadians are naturally weary. And I have come this evening to say to you that you need not be. Let us stay the course, because your government got this.
Teachers are striking in Colombia to demand the government to resolve the economic crisis and the education sector. Unions announced that 280,000 teachers were joining the national strike, affecting more than 8 million students across the country. They are also protesting against the National Development Plan pushed by President Iván Duque, which is contemplating budget cuts for the education sector. Our correspondent Tatiana Portela is at the march with the latest.
Teachers are mobilizing in Bogota to protest against the government of Iván Duque and its policies regarding public education. Demonstrators have announced they are taking part in a 48-hour national strike in cities across the country, especially in Cartagena, Barranquilla, Medellín and Cali. In the Guajira department, teachers have announced they are extending their strike to 72 hours. Teachers are demanding the National Development Plan to be suspended, since they say this is only affect the work of teachers and its stability. They are also demanding that the budget for public education is being revised and that corruption is being tackled. They are also supporting the demonstrations against the killing of social leaders and the repression of demonstrations in the Cauca department. We will keep you updated as this demonstration continues.
We thank Tatiana for that report. Tensions are rising in the Cauca department south of Colombia as clashes between social movements and security forces continue to be reported. One police officer was reportedly killed and 7 others were injured during a confrontation. The incident is yet to be clarified. Indigenous communities, campesinos, and Afro-descendant people have been protesting for over a week for their right to own land. Demonstrators have denounced the use of excessive force by security forces. The British Prime Minister Theresa May has asked the European Union for an extension until June 30th to negotiate Brexit. May said she already sent the request to the President of the European Council, Donald Tusk. On Thursday, the Prime Minister will travel to Brussels to meet with EU leaders. The opposition leader, Jeremy Corbyn, called the situation a national crisis and said he will also meet EU leaders on Thursday.
I have therefore this morning written to President Tusk, the President of the European Council, informing him that the UK seeks an extension to the Article 50 period until the 30th of June. Copies of the letter are being placed in the libraries of the House. The government intends to bring forward proposals for a third meaningful vote. If that vote is passed, the extension will give the House time to consider the withdrawal agreement bill. If not, the House will have to decide how to proceed. But as Prime Minister, I am not prepared to delay Brexit any further than the 30th of June.
We're now in the midst of a full-scale national crisis. Incompetence, failure and intransigence from the Prime Minister and her government have brought us to this point. Parliament has rejected her deal, it's rejected no deal. The Prime Minister now has no plan. In an effort to break the deadlock, I've held meetings with members all across the House, and I'm having further meetings today to find a compromise that supports jobs and living standards. Tomorrow, I'm meeting EU Prime Ministers and officials in Brussels. This, Mr. Speaker, is a national crisis.
Residents of Chimanimani in eastern Zimbabwe have started cleaning away the rubble and sorting through what little they have left in the aftermath of cyclone Idai. Chimanimani was among the worst hit areas, with more than 100 houses being completely destroyed as heavy rains, mudslides and raging winds. The cyclone also washed away crops, ripped bridges and brought massive sinkholes that swallowed up roads. Strong winds have prevented military rescue helicopters from reaching some of the most affected areas.
Chief Executive, they've been reporting false information.
Our district administrator and the chief executive have been reporting false information. Yesterday, we buried 42 bodies and more graves are being manually dug, now with hoes. We are just mobilizing ourselves as a community, and we have not received financial help from the government. We requested helicopters, as many as 10, but we only got one, which had a problem, and did not do much. It only rescued 2 people from the clinic.
Meanwhile, survivors are filling up hospitals as rescue teams continue looking for people in trees and rooftops. At least 98 people have been confirmed dead, while more than 200 are still missing. But officials fear the final death toll will be in the thousands.
I'm mainly suffering from hypothermia. I had a few fractures. I've just finished operating on a patient who had a ruptured diaphragm. He was involved in a traffic accident somewhere in the cyclone.
And in Mozambique, aid workers continue escorting survivors to safety at Beirut Airport in the aftermath of the cyclone. More than 80 people were rescued from Buzi district by South African Army with helicopters, where many have been stranded since March 15th.
My husband and our family are there. There is no way to save them, all of them. The rescue team told us to get inside the helicopter, but all our relatives stayed there.
We'll be back very soon. Stay with us. Welcome back. Cuban doctors working in Venezuela have been providing aid to all citizens for years. They say they will continue fulfilling their duty despite the lies spread by those who want to hurt both nations.
This is one of more than 60 integrated health centers, or CDIs, in the Venezuelan state of Miranda. It's called the Humberto Fernández Morán CDI.
Nobody has forced me to do anything. I'm here for my baby's checkup. We are treated well here.
We're here to work. We came to help our brothers and sisters. We can't just stop.
Thousands of Venezuelans come here every day and are treated without any political or social distinction or favor. For these doctors, the only priority is to guarantee access and quality medical care.
I was able to get the help I needed. The doctor checked my baby, they explained everything to me, and will help my children through rehab so she can work again. I cannot complain about these health centers after all the help they give us.
Reni is one of the 24,000 Venezuelan community doctors trained in Cuba at the Latin American School of Medicine as part of the integral collaboration agreement between the two countries. He says his only concern is treating his patients.
In my view, I have always said that we carry our own convictions within. First of all, everything we do is with the goal of helping people. We don't preach any political ideology, whatever they may be.
The Bolivarian Revolution has been helping the people, in particular those most in need, those who have never had anything, those who can't afford private clinics. That is why we are here. We're also teaching our own substitutes, because someday we'll have to leave, and it will be them who take over our duty.
Today in Venezuela, there are more than 20,000 Cuban doctors who provide their services as an act of solidarity with a single mission: to give health to the Venezuelan people. Laura Prada, Telesur Caracas.
Haiti's Prime Minister Jean-Henri Sand will have his say in the Senate after a majority of lawmakers in the lower house voted to remove him from the position. Sand is expected to respond to the vote against him. He was not present when the vote was taken on Monday and has refused to accept his dismissal, insisting that he is still heading the government. He has described the vote as illegal and unconstitutional. Some senators still regard Sand as Prime Minister, saying that the Senate takes precedence in this matter. Guyana's Elections Commission says fresh general elections cannot be held until November 2019. In a letter to the president, the commission chairman indicated that it would not be in a position to conduct polls before that date. Fresh elections are constitutionally due no later than 90 days after last December's no-confidence motion against the government. Opposition leader Bharat Jagdeo has said that from March 21st, his People's Progressive Party will consider the government illegal.
Thank you for acknowledging me, Mr. Speaker. We are asking for
St. Lucia's Prime Minister Alan Chestnut is one of 5 Caribbean leaders expected to hold talks with U.S. President Donald Trump this weekend. Our correspondent in St. Lucia, Alison Kentnish, has more.
St. Lucia's Prime Minister Alan Chastney will join his Jamaican counterparts Andrew Holness and the leaders of the Bahamas, the Dominican Republic and Haiti in a sit-down with U.S. President Donald Trump this weekend. In a statement, the White House confirmed that the meeting is set for Friday, March 22nd at Mar-a-Lago, that is President Trump's resort in Florida. And according to the statement, Trump's meeting with the Caribbean leaders will reaffirm his strong friendship and commitment to those countries and signal the importance of the Caribbean to this hemisphere. It confirmed that Venezuela is down for discussion, stating that the president will speak to the leaders on developments in that country. Now, the U.S. continues to support opposition leader Juan Guaido, and they are urging their diplomatic allies to follow suit. The talks will also focus on China's growing influence in the Caribbean, and Washington has already warned that it will counter China's economic practices in the region. And it should not come as a big surprise to many that St. Lucia's leader is part of the talks, as even before entering office in June 2016, he warned that his foreign policy agenda would differ greatly to that of his predecessor, Prime Minister Dr. Kenny Anthony, who embraced the Latin American and Caribbean alliance. And in 2017, Chastney told the media that as far as financing for development is concerned, his new model of diplomacy would be less about ALBA and more about leaning towards traditional allies like the United States and Canada. And while St. Lucia has not broken ranks with CARICOM's long-standing and united front of non-interference and non-intervention in Venezuela, the country continues to call for fresh elections in Venezuela. And just to put things in perspective, last year President Trump received severe backlash by including Haiti in a group of countries he referred to as, quote, shithole countries, end quote. He later stated that he was simply referring to the fact that Haiti is a poor and troubled country. The White House says that Friday's meeting will also explore energy, investment and security cooperation.
We thank Allison for that report. During his visit to the U.S., Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro reaffirmed he supports the intentions of the U.S. in Venezuela. But left-wing leaders in Brazil announced they will continue to defend peace, sovereignty and self-determination across Latin America.
According to experts, the change in Brazil's foreign policy for Latin America destroys nearly 150 years of diplomacy. The stance assumed by the government of Jair Bolsonaro, ratified by his visit to the United States, showed their submission to issues like Washington's meddling in Venezuela.
Since the war with Paraguay, Brazil has had a position to try to maintain peace in our region. Brazil has supported dialogue, mediation of conflicts, and has not had a role to aggravate conflicts. Now, with this new position, they threaten the peace of our region and also the sovereignty of people. Because we are not only talking about Venezuela, of their sovereignty, of the self-determination of its people. But we are also talking about oil, about the Amazon, of our biodiversity and water.
Recently, lawmaker for the Social Christian Party, Eduardo Bolsonaro, qualified Cuba and Venezuela as slags of humanity. For their part, left-wing leaders affirm that such words are only deserved by the current Brazilian president, who does not respect life, freedom, or democracy, while preaching fascism and violence.
We can't back threats of any kind, mainly from those who come from North America, a region that has historically submitted our people, imposed dictators in our continent. We cannot allow threats of intervention, like the ones lobbied against Venezuela. The words of the President of the United States, of their political groups, of the representatives in Venezuela, like Mr. Juan Guaidó, those words are an affront to sovereignty. We defend peace and sovereignty and hope that the situation in Venezuela be decided by Venezuelans and not with foreign intervention.
In the last months, politicians, lawmakers, and representatives of social movements in Brazil have ratified their defense of Latin American unity and integration, and their respect for the sovereignty of Venezuela.
A vigil was held in Costa Rica for late Indigenous leader Sergio Rojas, who was killed after being shot 15 times. Rojas was a fierce defender of the territories of the Bribri de Salitre community. The UN High Commission for Human Rights in Costa Rica has called for an investigation. President Carlos Alvarado has condemned the murder.
From the government, we completely condemn and reject this act of violence against the life of an indigenous leader. This is a tragic day for the Bribri people, for indigenous people, and for all of Costa Rica.
Esto es un día trágico para el pueblo Bribri.
In Chile, reports of abuses against LGBT people rose 44% in 2018. According to LGBT rights organization, there were almost 700 cases registered, the highest figure in 1 year since records began. Those cases represent 22% of total reports recorded in the last 17 years. Social and education policies have succeeded in reducing teenage pregnancy in Uruguay, but there's still a lot of work to do. Let's see more in this report.
Despite figures showing a decrease of teenage pregnancy in Uruguay, experts say this is still an issue that needs to be tackled.
El embarazo no intencional a los adolescentes en el Uruguay.
Teenage pregnancy between the 90s and 2015 made up to 16% of all pregnancies in our country. In the 90s, that meant that there were 9,000 births that were a result from teenage pregnancy. In 2014, there were 8,000 births from pregnancies of girls between 10 and 18.
Estaba en niñas entre 10 y 18 años.
The government developed national education and health policies and provided free contraceptive methods. Results were proven on this short term. Teenage pregnancy decreased in 38%. That means that in 2018 there were 2,800 less teenage pregnancies than in 2016.
This is the result of more than a decade of work that made possible that women could access to reproductive and planning services. The policies went beyond the public health sector. It also touched on social policies and the promotion of equality. This allows teenagers to plan and have their own projects beyond maternity.
According to experts, teenage pregnancy is the result of the lack of social and education policies. In Uruguay, 22.4% of teenagers with no access to basic needs are mothers. 57.7% of women between 25 and 29 that became teenage mothers didn't complete their education. 3 out of every 4 of them dropped out from school before getting pregnant, something experts say is key to keep on tackling teenage pregnancy.
The health system cannot ignore the situation. We need to understand that in order to prevent teenage pregnancy, it needs to target young girls that are at a risk of dropping out from school. Telling them which contraceptive method to use is not enough. This is not a preventive measure on its own. Policies also have to find a way to push girls to study.
In 1996, almost 1,000 babies were born in Uruguay from mothers between 15 and 19. In 2018, that number decreased to almost half, and the rates keep on decreasing.
What Uruguay has done is reduce teenage pregnancies from 16% to 11.4%, and we expect to maintain this tendency. Many girls under 14 are also victims of sexual abuse and exploitation. This shouldn't happen.
According to United Nations figures, the main cause for teenage pregnancies in Uruguay comes from economic inequality, lack of access to education, and the lack of social and gender policies.
We'll be back very soon. Stay with us. Welcome back. The South Africa state utility company Eskom will make more power cuts this week. The public enterprise minister has said it does not know when the rolling blackouts would end. Eskom supplies more than 90% of the country's power, but has suffered repeated falls at its coal-fired power station. This marks the 5th day of blackouts. Police in Kenya has seized $20 million of fake money from Barclays Bank, and 6 people have been arrested. In a statement, Barclays said a customer held a personal safe box at its Queenway branch and concealed the fake currency against the bank rules. Among the 6 arrested were the alleged owner of the box, a fake investor, and 2 bank officials. Former Bosnian Serb leader Radovan Karadzic has been sentenced to life in prison for genocide and other atrocities during the Balkan Wars of the 1990s. Joy spread in the Bosnian city Srebrenica as a court in The Hague announced the sentence. The former leader was sentenced for the 1995 Srebrenica massacre that killed more than 8,000 Muslim men and boys by Bosnian Serb forces. This is considered to be the worst atrocity to take place in Europe since World War II. The government in New Zealand has forbidden the possession of videos of the church mosque terrorist attack. Authorities will also release a statement on digital media safety. The gunmen who attacked 2 mosques last Friday live-streamed the events on social media. Facebook said it removed the 1.5 million videos globally in the first 24 hours after the attack.
The footage related to the attack has been classed as objectionable, so it is an offence under New Zealand law to possess, share and/or host it. I understand the Department of Internal Affairs is planning to issue an updated media statement around digital safety, so more information can be found there.
UN war crimes investigators have called on Israel to stop its snipers from using lethal force against protesters in the Gaza Strip. The investigator said there is an urgent need for Israel to review its rules of engagement because it is not conforming with international law. A UN report revealed that Israeli troops killed 189 Palestinians and wounded more than 6,100 during protests between March 30th and December 31st of 2018. And Jewish extremist groups have called for a huge raid on the Al-Aqsa Mosque on Thursday. The so-called Temple Mount group, an umbrella body of Jewish extremist organizations, announced that on Facebook. Israeli security forces have banned many Muslims from accessing the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound, but they continue to allow Israeli settlers who wish to perform religious rituals there. And with that story, we've come to the end of this news brief. These and other stories, as always, find them on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also join us on social media. We are on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. For Telesur English, I am Estefania Bravo. Thank you for watching.